Like, I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear.
D4VD's world turned upside down after a chilling discovery in his abandoned Tesla. What first looked like just another viral clip suddenly became evidence in a possible homicide case. Investigators now believe the shocking footage could be the key to putting David Anthony Burke, better known as D4VD, behind bars for life. Here's the breakdown. David, a 20-year-old breakout artist from Houston, rose to fame in 2022 with his haunting track Romantic Homicide. Fans thought it was just raw emotion turned into art. But after police identified the victim as 15-year-old Celeste Rivas Hernandez, a teenager from Lake Elsinore, the internet began asking, was his music simply creative expression or a confession hiding in plain sight? Unlike most industry stars, David didn't come up through record labels or polished studios. His story started in his sister's closet with nothing but an iPhone and raw emotion. That DIY authenticity made his songs resonate with millions of young listeners who felt his pain. But now, that same authenticity feels darker. The persona D4VD built as the soft-spoken, heartbroken voice of Gen Z might not have been an act. It may have been the perfect mask. While fans streamed his pain, investigators now wonder if those lyrics foreshadowed something far more sinister. And here's where it gets even heavier. Clips from his interviews, like the Zach Sang Show, sound completely different when played back today. Words that once seemed like reflections of heartbreak now feel like chilling hints of something real. The question haunting the internet is simple. Was Romantic Homicide just a song, or a roadmap to tragedy?
I feel like I'm more comfortable with expressing myself and connecting with people in a way that I feel is speaking, without singing. Romantic Homicide and Here With Me is like anybody could have made those songs.
Sure, anyone could write dark songs, but not everyone ends up with a missing teenager decomposing in the trunk of their Tesla. The casual way David brushed off his violent lyrics as universal feelings now looks like manipulation, the kind that should have made people stop and ask harder questions. While he built the image of a sensitive artist who connected with teenage pain, behind the scenes, he was constructing something far darker, a hunting ground disguised as a fan community. His Discord servers became digital trap houses, places where vulnerable young girls went looking for comfort and instead got targeted by someone who knew exactly how to exploit their loneliness. David didn't act like a celebrity towering above his fans. He positioned himself as a big brother figure, someone who had been there too. He slid into conversations with advice, reassurance, and that intoxicating sense of being truly understood. What his fans never realized was that he was studying them, mapping their vulnerabilities like a playbook. The demographics reveal the trap. His audience was mostly teenage girls, 13 to 17, many already battling depression, family drama, or the confusion of growing up in suburban America. These weren't streetwise kids who could spot danger a mile away. They were sheltered teens who believed the internet was safe and that a soft-spoken, artistic celebrity couldn't possibly be a threat. Even his trademark shoe tattoo worked as part of the strategy. To fans, it seemed like a deep artistic symbol of silence and pain. Young girls copied it to show loyalty, not realizing they were branding themselves with a predator's calling card, one he used to train them into secrecy about inappropriate interactions. David's social media presence was just as calculated. He knew exactly when to post, late at night, when kids were vulnerable, scrolling alone in their rooms. He dropped cryptic lines about feeling misunderstood, shared behind-the-scenes snippets that made fans feel special, and occasionally responded to comments in ways that made followers feel chosen. It wasn't random. It was deliberate grooming, designed to build the perfect trap under the mask of art. And whenever things got too dark, he could hide behind the excuse of artistic expression. Violent lyrics, disturbing imagery, even videos with murdered women. Anyone who raised concerns could be dismissed as narrow-minded, someone who just didn't get it. It was the perfect cover, and for a long time, it worked. Celeste Rivas Hernandez wasn't just some clueless suburban kid who didn't know the world could be dangerous. She was smart, creative, and only 15 years old. A girl from Lake Elsinore with dreams far bigger than her small-town reality. The kind of artistic soul that makes someone shine, but also leaves them vulnerable in a world where predators dress themselves up like Prince Charming and slide through DMs. Born on September 7, 2009, Celeste grew up in a tight-knit Latino family determined to give their kids the stability of suburban California life. At just 5'1" and around 110 pounds, with wavy brown hair and deep brown eyes, she carried herself with a quiet confidence, as if she already knew she was meant for something greater. Her style was pure Gen Z, TikTok-inspired, expressive, a splash of red ink rebellion in the form of a tattoo she wore like a statement. Teachers described her as magnetic. Neighbors saw her as outgoing but sensitive. And friends knew her as someone with a creative spark that made people want to be around her. Celeste wasn't an average teenager just scrolling her For You page. She was a gifted writer and artist. Teachers remembered the essays she turned in, pieces so emotionally layered they read like they'd been written by someone twice her age. But that depth, that sensitivity, was a double-edged sword. It made her extraordinary, and also the perfect target for someone who knew how to weaponize empathy and exploit the trust of young creatives looking for validation. Even her tattoo became part of the story. To her family, it looked like typical teenage rebellion. To investigators, it would later prove to be a chilling link to David. In the months before she disappeared, the shifts in her digital life were subtle but telling. Friends noticed she grew more secretive about her online interactions, clutching her phone tighter, dodging questions about who she was texting. She was online later than ever, her moods swinging wildly, ecstatic after one set of messages, crushed when replies didn't come fast enough. Her best friend, who spoke on condition of anonymity because of harassment from David's fans, described a transformation. Celeste went from a girl who openly talked about crushes to someone who shut down at even the hint of questions about her romantic life. At home, her family began to notice too. The late nights, the whispered typing long after bedtime, the emotional roller coaster tied to whoever was on the other side of that screen. Looking back, the warning signs were there. But to adults outside the digital trenches, it all seemed like normal teenage behavior. In reality, it was the grooming process in motion. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, the changes in Celeste were impossible to ignore. She started drifting away from her close friends, skipping plans, and losing interest in the hobbies she used to love. More and more, her conversations turned to ideas about starting fresh, about being meant for something bigger. Words that, in hindsight, sound less like teenage daydreams and more like someone whispering promises of a new life into her ear. Her mother, Maria Hernandez, would later admit that Celeste had quietly mentioned a boyfriend named David. But any time the family pressed for details, she shut down. In a suburban community where most teen relationships were an open secret, her secrecy was the red flag no one wanted to believe. April 5, 2024, started like any other day for the Hernandez family. Celeste was buzzing with excitement for movie night with her older brother Matthew, a weekly ritual they'd kept since middle school. She spent longer than usual picking her outfit, a mix of teenage confidence and childhood innocence, gray pants, a black sweater, a hat, and Hello Kitty sandals. The look said everything about who she was at 15, caught between growing up and still holding on to pieces of girlhood. Matthew pulled up at 7 p.m., expecting the usual routine, Celeste waiting with her playful complaints about being hungry or her excitement about the horror flick they had planned. Instead, the park was empty. Her phone rang, then went straight to voicemail. The timeline of that night tells a chilling story. At 6 p.m., Celeste had posted a selfie captioned, "Movie night with my bro." But somewhere in that hour between her post and her scheduled meetup, something went terribly wrong. At first, everyone thought she was running late. But as the hours stretched on and calls went unanswered, Maria's instincts screamed the truth. This wasn't a runaway. This was danger. The search for Celeste began immediately and stretched into a 16-month nightmare. Flyers went up across Lake Elsinore. Search parties combed the area. Her family flooded social media with pleas for help. But behind the desperate hope, reality had already taken hold. Celeste was never coming home. From the start, law enforcement treated her as a likely runaway. It's a familiar story. Working-class Latino family, suburban teenager, probably just another kid who'll turn up. Statistically, most missing teens do. But that assumption cost crucial time. And in Celeste's case, it was deadly. The haunting detail? Months before her body was found, Maria had already told investigators that her daughter mentioned a boyfriend named David. At the time, it sounded like normal teenage romance. But when her remains surfaced, that name became the key to everything. By September 2025, more than a year after she vanished, Celeste's case had faded from the headlines. The family still pushed for answers, but the media had moved on. Then came the discovery that would change everything. September 8th, 2025. Workers at Hollywood Tow Yard on North Mansfield Avenue noticed a sickening smell seeping from a black Tesla Model 3. In Los Angeles, abandoned luxury cars are nothing new. But this wasn't just another repo. The California heat had turned the vehicle into a coffin. When LAPD opened the trunk, the scene was nightmarish. A body, wrapped in black plastic, decomposed to just 71 pounds, barely half of Celeste's weight when she disappeared. The evidence left no doubt. The clothes matched exactly what she wore that night. White tube top, black leggings, yellow chain bracelet, stud earrings. And then, the most damning detail of all, still visible on her right index finger, the red ink tattoo that tied her to David. The car's registration confirmed it. The Tesla belonged to David Anthony Burke, the rising R&B star better known as D4VD, whose breakout song Romantic Homicide had become the haunting soundtrack of millions of teens' lives. For Maria Hernandez, the call from investigators was every parent's nightmare and only source of closure. After 16 months of flyers, searches, false leads, and sleepless nights, the words came heavy and final. "I knew it was my baby." Maria Hernandez's voice cracked as she described the moment her worst fears were confirmed. For months, she had clung to hope that Celeste would come home, but the details investigators shared matched everything. The dental records and DNA sealed the identification, the distinctive tattoo erased all doubt, but it was the yellow chain bracelet, the birthday gift from her brother Matthew, that shattered the family. That bracelet was a symbol of love, now transformed into evidence of a nightmare. For Matthew, the discovery cut especially deep. "She was on her way to see a movie with me, but never came back," he told reporters, his words heavy with disbelief. The realization that his sister's murder was tied to a global celebrity, an artist whose music played in cars, headphones, and bedrooms worldwide, was almost too surreal to process. As news of the body in David's Tesla spread, his team scrambled to control the narrative. Within hours, his lawyers rolled out a carefully detailed alibi. Tour schedules, flight records, hotel receipts, all designed to prove he wasn't in Los Angeles when the trunk was opened. At the time Celeste's remains were discovered, David had been performing in Minneapolis as part of his We World tour, with Seattle as his next stop. On the surface, the alibi checked out, but it left bigger, more unsettling questions. When was Celeste's body placed in that car? And could David have been involved long before it ended up in that tow yard? His management issued a polished statement emphasizing full cooperation, but carefully avoiding any acknowledgement of guilt. Yet David's personal behavior painted a different picture. Shortly after the story broke, He posted a cryptic 67 to social media, numbers that sent his fan base into a frenzy of decoding theories, then vanished from all platforms. The contrast was striking, a legal team projecting calm professionalism, while David himself disappeared under the weight of suspicion. Within 48 hours, the fallout was swift. His Seattle show was abruptly canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Major brands began pulling the plug. Crocs and Hollister quietly scrubbed ad campaigns, while streaming platforms added disclaimers to his catalog about the ongoing investigation. And then the internet erupted. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Instagram, each became a hive of amateur investigation. Millions of users dissected evidence, built timelines, and argued theories, some grounded, others spiraling into the bizarre. The coincidences were enough to fuel conspiracy fires on their own. One detail stood out above all. David's breakout video, Romantic Homicide, dropped on September 7, 2022, Celeste's 13th birthday. In it, David's blindfolded character shoots a girlfriend before cradling her lifeless body in the rain. At the time, it was hailed as haunting art. Now, it looked like prophecy. Internet sleuths slowed the video frame by frame. They pointed out the actress playing his victim, her build, her hair, even her facial features, bore an uncanny resemblance to Celeste. To them, it wasn't just art imitating life. It was a blueprint. The way the death scene in Romantic Homicide was staged, his victim's body carefully placed, the killer's face void of emotion, felt chillingly close to what investigators believed happened to Celeste. But the biggest surge of online speculation came not from the video, but from alleged Discord logs and a leaked demo track titled Celeste that started circulating across social media. Screenshots claiming to show conversations between David and a user named Celeste spread rapidly, though none of them could be verified. If authentic, the logs dated back to 2022, when Celeste was only 12 years old, and seemed to display textbook grooming tactics. David allegedly cast himself as a mentor, someone who understood her, while quietly isolating her from friends, insisting on secrecy, and gradually steering their chats toward darker, more inappropriate subjects. Then came the leaked demo. Celeste, supposedly recorded in December 2023, just months before her disappearance, contained lyrics about innocence lost and a girl who slipped away. One haunting line spoke of red ink promises that can't be broken, a phrase many believed referenced the tattoos both David and Celeste shared. Identical red esh markings etched on their right index fingers. That tattoo became one of the most hotly debated pieces of evidence in the case. To critics, it was undeniable proof of a direct connection. To supporters, it was nothing more than coincidence, pointing out that similar tattoos had been spotted on other celebrities, from Rihanna to Lindsay Lohan. Still, after Celeste's body was found, the meaning of David's entire discography shifted. What millions once consumed as art was now being dissected as potential confession. Every lyric, every visual, every cryptic social post was reconsidered as evidence of premeditation. At the center of it all was Romantic Homicide. In the back of my mind, you died, and I didn't even cry, not a single tear. Lyrics once seen as a metaphor for emotional numbness and heartbreak were now read as a literal admission of murder. The song's global success, fueled by listeners projecting their own pain onto its words, suddenly looked like a sinister trick, its true meaning hiding in plain sight. Even David's past interviews began to feel incriminating. In one conversation with Zach Sang, he explained his creative process as building a cinematic universe with characters, antagonists, and protagonists. At the time, it was framed as artistic maturity. Now it sounded like a blueprint for something far darker.
It's all of them. I try to include a piece of myself in every part of the music, but I try to get like every different perspective I can, every possible perspective, every possible viewpoint.
What once sounded like artistic maturity now feels far more unsettling. David's explanation, originally praised as insight into his creative process, suddenly raises darker questions. Whose perspective was he really channeling in those songs about murder and violence? His talk of building a cinematic universe filled with antagonists and protagonists no longer reads as harmless imagination. Instead, it carries a chilling weight, hinting that the boundaries between his art and his real-life behavior may have been dangerously thin.
But the 4 is like, I replaced the A with it, took out the I. And the 4 is like an ongoing D4VD lore. Like it's 4 universes with all these different characters.
Oh, interesting.
I'm building out this like cinematic universe. In the future is gonna be like a whole bunch of different stuff. I can't spoil too much now, but it's like, I got this blindfold character that you see in my music videos. That's gonna expand into like these different antagonists and protagonists and like a whole anime thing. It's gonna be crazy, it's gonna be crazy.
Critics began to argue that David's entire artistic persona may have been less about creative storytelling and more about building a shield of plausible deniability for real violence. The blindfolded figure that appeared throughout his visuals, once thought to represent artistic vision, now seemed more like a symbol of hiding in plain sight, of committing acts he never wanted fully seen. The response to David's case fractured along familiar lines. Some voices in hip-hop and urban communities saw it as yet another young black artist being unfairly targeted by a system quick to assume the worst. Others countered that the evidence was simply too specific to dismiss, and that defending abusers in the name of racial solidarity only deepens the harm done to vulnerable young women. This debate quickly bled into a larger conversation about art on trial. Hip-hop has a long, uneasy history of lyrics being used in court as evidence of criminal intent. Many warned that if David's songs were held against him, it could set a dangerous precedent for black artists who blur fiction and reality in their work. But the counterpoint was blunt. When your lyrics and videos mirror the details of a real murder, when the art seems to rehearse the very crime you're accused of, that's not expression anymore. That's evidence. Generations split on how to process it. Older fans, raised on the idea that rap often operates in fiction and character work, were more willing to separate the art from the allegations. Younger listeners, especially David's teenage core audience, had built parasocial connections based on authenticity. To them, his confessions didn't feel like performance. They felt like truth. The most devoted supporters lashed out, launching harassment campaigns against journalists, internet sleuths, and even Celeste's grieving family. Death threats replaced debate, and defending David became its own form of loyalty test inside fan circles. But beyond David himself lies the harder question. How does music culture, especially in the digital age, protect young women from predatory behavior? The industry has long failed at this, from R. Kelly to lesser-known cases that never made headlines. Now, social media has multiplied the risks, giving predators direct access to vulnerable fans and new tools to groom them under the guise of community and connection. Whether David's music was a chilling prophecy, an outright confession, or the darkest coincidence, one truth stands above all. Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved far better than the fate she suffered.